right, the big announcement. Bharti Airtel has entered into a legally binding definitive agreement with the Zain Group on an enterprise valuation of $10.7 billion. Siddharth Zarabi also standing by with the details. Siddharth, it's a done deal. The official release is out. I've got a copy of it, but you've gone through it as well. Take us through it.
Well, I think some of the key takeaways from this press release, which basically says that a legally binding agreement has been signed and therefore the deal is done. It says Bharti will acquire Zain's African mobile services in 15 countries, a customer base of 42 million. Zain is the market leader in 10 of these countries. I'm going to read Mr. Mittal's quote. He says, and I quote, "This agreement is a landmark for the global telecom industry and a game changer for Bharti. More importantly, this transaction is a pioneering step towards South-South cooperation and strengthening of ties." He then goes on to say that he would like to compliment the Zain Group for building a world-class operation in Africa and said that he has enjoyed working with them on this transaction. Bharti has also taken care to talk about the support from Singtel, one of the key shareholders in the company, and the external advisors. The press release does not talk about any timelines for the implementation schedule. Of course, that is an obvious thing. Once with the definitive agreement, legal agreement has been done, I think most of these things come into play. It reiterates the fact that Standard Chartered Bank was the lead advisor to Bharti on this transaction and Barclays Capital, the joint lead advisor, with the SBI Group as the lead onshore advisor. The total customer base as a result of this acquisition now goes for Bharti Airtel and Zain, the combined entity, if we may call it at this stage, 179 million in 18 countries. This is the second major acquisition by Bharti. It has acquired Warid recently, and if you look at the customer base, I think it straight away moves into the top 10, possibly the 6th or 7th largest operator in terms of subscribers, far ahead of all its Indian competition, and clearly something that Mr. Mittal himself and Bharti Airtel have been looking forward for a lot of time. The key takeaway, again, to reiterate from this statement, no details about the structure. We know from sources that there is a SPV structure that has been used for this overseas leveraged buyout, and that this signing was done in Amsterdam according to our sources. But this press release does not talk or give any more details about that. I think clearly at this point of time, Bharti Airtel and Zain both only willing to say that a legally binding agreement has been signed, not going beyond that in this statement. Perhaps more details will emerge as we go on. Shireen?
All right, hold on to that because we've got Pradeep Baijal, the former chairman of the TRAI, joining us. Mr. Baijal, many thanks for joining us on CNBC TV 18. Sir, a big day for Indian telecom. With this deal, Bharti Airtel will become the world's 5th largest wireless company with operations across 18 countries. As the former TRAI chairman, sir, your initial reactions to this?
Not only as the former TRAI chairman, also as Secretary Disinvestment, I am very happy that Indian companies have grown so fast and have started acquiring companies abroad. That explains the inherent strength of the Indian companies, Indian entrepreneurs. I recall when I joined as TRAI chairman, Bharti was in trouble. It was having losses. The IPO was not, the price was not going beyond 27-30 rupees. So they had a tremendous growth because they were highly professional in their work, and they had tremendous managerial strength, and that is the strength on which they have acquired Zain.
Right. Mr. Baijal, we don't know what the final structure is. What we do have, of course, is from our sources on the fact that it will be an SPV-led structure. But really what Sunil Mittal is saying, that we are committed to partnering with the governments of these countries to take affordable telecom services to the remotest geographies and bridging the digital divide. You think Bharti will be able to replicate the success that it's had in India in these 15 diverse African nations, sir?
I said they have tremendous managerial strength and they have always leveraged their strengths very intelligently. So I see no reason why they will not be successful in 10 or 15 African countries. After all, India is a very difficult country to operate in, and they have shown their strengths of operating in India, the entire management team of Bharti, and I am sure they will be able to leverage the strength of that team in Africa as well.
All right, so hold that thought. My colleague Sajith Mangat is joining in with what he is picking up from his sources in terms of the structure of this deal. Sajith, we already have clarity on the funding of this deal. Standard Chartered, Barclays lead as far as the funding is concerned. Of course, 13 other banks also involved. But what are you now picking up in terms of the structure?
Shirin, what we understand from our sources is that it's going to be the entire deal will be structured over a period of 6 to 9 months. The first installment, the entire payment would be made on a staggered way. The first installment would be given in approximately 21 days, and then there would be various milestones. You need to understand that there are 15 countries, and as and when you get approval from each of the countries, a portion of the entire money would be handed over to the Zain group. Each of the countries have been valued separately, and consolidated the enterprise value comes to roughly around $10.7 billion. If you look at the contingent liabilities, what we understand from our sources is the contingent liabilities are to the tune of nearly $600 million. So this, a part of this, nearly 20 to 30% of this contingent liability will be provided in the escrow account. So some of our sources are saying that it could be upwards of nearly $400 million which will go into the escrow account. So Bharti will be paying $8.3 billion, but that would be staggered as and when they get approvals from various jurisdictions, because there is various clauses which get triggered in many of the African countries due to the ownership structures, and also change in ownership because of telecom regulations in these countries.
All right, Sajith, hold that thought. Let me go back to Siddharth and pick up on something else that Sunil Mittal is being quoted as having said in this press release. Siddharth, Sunil Mittal saying the extremely tight timelines and the enormity of the task has posed a real challenge. Bharti was able to achieve this important milestone through much hard work and support from Singtel and external advisors. There's been a lot of talk on the role that Singtel has actually played. In his interview with us, Sunil Mittal had very clearly said that Singtel will not be funding this deal, but he has here mentioned that it has happened with the support of Singtel. Singtel, of course, part of the Bharti board, so it has always been a tripartite deal in that sense.
Well, that's right, Shireen. In fact, the fact that the timeline was the way it was kept is basically a throwback to the MTN experience. This time around, we were clear from our sources from day one when this deal was announced that there would be no extensions. They actually said as much, because given their experience, they wanted to do this far faster. And Mr. Mittal, in his interview to us, had clearly said that this is a far more neater and far less complex deal than MTN. So in a sense, the timeline is pretty tight for a transaction of this size. And as regards Singtel has always been there, and in our previous communications with the company, it has always maintained that it would go ahead and further this transaction, help this transaction of Bharti Airtel going overseas in every possible manner. For the moment, it is a leveraged buyout. Clearly, the amount of funding, if at all Singtel will do, will depend on whether there is any dilution. So there are several ifs and buts to that, but clearly the Bharti top management has consistently maintained that there is no dilution has been discussed, and clearly because of the timelines that are involved with such a dilution in the context of the Indian regulatory framework would not have allowed this to happen. As regards Singtel's place, it is one of the key investors and will stay, and therefore for Singtel also it is a major growth opportunity in the market of Africa. And I would like to quickly talk about one of the key reasons, assuming that the SPV structure that we reported on our channel some days back is the structure that has been utilized, and from all available information, the agreement being signed, the SPVs being headquartered in Amsterdam, which is also the headquarters of Zain Africa BV, there is a clear tax angle to it, and that tax angle is that the laws in Netherlands provide a tax preference. In fact, India and the Netherlands have a double taxation avoidance agreement. So clearly, that is also one of the factors in terms of the SPV structure being used, not really unique to this deal, has been utilized in the past, but for Bharti it provides a considerable amount of flexibility going forward with regard to the very point that you mentioned. How does this deal get funded on a long term? Will it only be a debt-based deal, or will some other options be explored? So for the time being, a leveraged buyout being utilized to ensure that the transaction is completed in time, that there are no extensions, and therefore any extension could possibly lead lead to various issues coming up. At this point of time, this is the funding that the company has put in place. But I would hazard a guess that this will not be the final funding structure, Shireen.
All right, hold that thought because Sajid has some more comments in terms of the long-term funding. Sajid, what are you picking up?
Shireen, what we understand is that the current funding structure of $8.3 billion comprises of nearly 40% of long-term loans, and the remaining 60% is bridge loans, which can be extended to the period of nearly 4 to 5 years going forward. But over the next 6 months, we are going to see some equity funding coming into the balance sheet of Bharti. Remember that Bharti is taking nearly $8.3 billion of loan here. It's going to spend roughly around $2 billion on the 3G auction. So you're talking about nearly $10 billion of debt coming on the books of Bharti, which is going to put some pressure on the Bharti balance sheet, and that I think would be again investors would be taking note of that. And to prevent that, Bharti would be raising equity funding, and that would be through a rights issue, which will comprise of both equity and debt component going forward. What we understand is that roughly 20,000 crores could be the amount which Bharti could be raising via rights issue in terms of equity component and debt component going forward, and that could be used to deleverage the balance sheet going forward, because you need to remember that even though Bharti is spending $8.3 billion in acquiring this, over the next 2 to 3 years Bharti would be requiring $1 billion to $2 billion to invest in Zain Africa so that it can turn around the operations of Zain Africa going forward in the next 1 to 2 years.
All right, Dobik Peter joins